The dog jumped in front of the doctor at the hospital. Seconds later, everyone knew why. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. It was 2:17 a.m. when Elizabeth Carter, a detective with the K9 unit, slowly opened her eyes, feeling the tight grip of bandages around her stomach. The emergency surgery had gone well, but a thick fog clouded her mind, heavy and unsettling. Outside in the lobby, a German shepherd with black and tan fur paced back and forth, restless. Max, her loyal partner, hadn't rested since the accident that nearly took Elizabeth's life. A nurse, thin with platinum blonde hair and eyes as cold as ice, pushed open the door to her room with a stiff smile. His uniform was crisp, almost too perfect, but something about his rigid walk triggered a quiet alarm in anyone paying close attention. In his gloved hand, he held a syringe filled with an amber liquid that glinted ominously under the fluorescent light. Max sensed the man's presence and let out a deep growl, like a storm brewing low. With a swift leap, he forced the door wider and planted himself in front of Elizabeth's bed. His sharp teeth gleamed and drool dripped in tense strings. The fake nurse frowned and stepped back, but not far enough. Max lunged, snapping his jaws with surgical precision onto the man's sleeve, making him drop the syringe. It rolled slowly across the floor, stopping by the nightstand, its contents trembling with each thud. The commotion drew two real nurses and the head doctor on duty, Dr. Michael Thompson, a middle-aged man with a stern face and a neatly trimmed beard. His sharp blue eyes locked onto the scene immediately. A security guard, alerted by the staff, rushed in and restrained the imposter, who barely managed to mutter a few words before being handcuffed. "You won't get it." "No one will." Hours later, in a private meeting room, Dr. Thompson examined the syringe under an ultraviolet lamp. His face darkened as he read the early lab results. The liquid was a highly advanced neurotoxin, undetectable by standard tests, designed to mimic a natural heart failure. The report showed that even the tiny dose in that syringe would have been enough to kill Elizabeth without leaving a trace. Elizabeth, still weak, propped herself up in bed, gently stroking Max's head. Her grey eyes, full of resolve, scanned the room and landed on the evidence. This wasn't just an attempt on her life. Her gut, honed by years of cracking tough cases, told her something bigger was at play, and Max, her faithful guardian, had sensed the danger before anyone else. Dawn crept slowly over the city, painting the tall buildings with a soft golden glow. Inside Elizabeth's hospital room, the air felt heavy, thick with unspoken questions. Sitting in a stiff-backed chair, the detective held a file that Dr. Michael Thompson had handed her moments earlier. Her dark brown hair, usually tied back neatly, now fell in loose waves over her shoulders, giving her a look that was both vulnerable and fiercely untamed. The file listed 3 special unit officers, Daniel Brooks, Jennifer Hayes, and Thomas Reed. All young, all top-notch, with spotless records, all lying in comas across different clinics after routine medical procedures. A chill ran down Elizabeth's spine. Her instincts, sharpened by years in the field, started connecting dots others refused to see. Max, sprawled at her feet, lifted his head and let out a soft whine. As if reading her mind, he sprang up and padded to a table where medical samples from the patients sat. With a nudge of his nose, he pushed a vial toward Elizabeth. She picked it up carefully, watching as Max grew tense, his nostrils flaring, his body rigid with fierce alertness. There was no doubt, the same poison that nearly killed her was in those 3 cases. Later, in the cold office of the Special Crimes Unit, Elizabeth met with her closest confidant, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was tall, with ash blonde hair and sharp blue eyes that radiated smarts. She always dressed sharp, grey suit, crisp white shirt. Their friendship went back to the academy, forged through grueling drills and late-night talks. "This isn't random, Liz," Sarah said, slamming the file shut. "If these substances are linked, someone on the inside is giving access." Elizabeth nodded, her gaze hardening like forged steel. "And I'm going to find out who. I'm not sitting still while more of us go down." Their talk was cut short when Captain Robert Hayes stormed in. Tall, broad, with light brown hair slicked back and a square jaw, his presence demanded respect and unease. His uniform was flawless, but even sharper was the calm mask he always wore. His deep blue eyes seemed to read people with icy precision. "Detective Carter," he said in a deep voice, "I need you to drop any digging into these medical incidents. The department's decided this is for internal affairs, not the K9 unit. Elizabeth stared him down. Something in his tone, the rush to shut her down, sparked suspicion. Max, at her side, let out a low, steady growl, his amber eyes locked on the captain. Hayes noticed the dog's reaction, and though it was subtle, his fingers tightened on the folder he held. With a forced half-smile, he turned and left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Elizabeth leaned toward Sarah, her voice a sharp whisper. He knows something, and Max felt it too. Sarah's jaw tightened, her eyes serious. Then we're playing a much riskier game than we thought. That night, alone in her apartment, Elizabeth pored over records from Pharmaceutical Solutions, a drug company with a record so clean it raised red flags. Max, restless, kept circling the door. Suddenly, an unmarked envelope slid under it. Elizabeth grabbed it cautiously. Inside was a confidential document showing Pharmacore had supplied experimental drugs to local hospitals under fake protocols. On the last page, a signature stood out like a knife in the dark. Robert Hayes. Night had fallen over the city, a blanket of fog weaving silently between the buildings. In Elizabeth's apartment, a dim desk lamp cast long shadows across the walls as she sifted through the papers scattered on her table. Her sharp features and piercing eyes were marked by dark circles from a mind that wouldn't rest. Max, ever watchful, lay by the window, his ears perked at every odd sound. At 2:46 a.m., an encrypted email pinged her inbox. No sender, just a subject line. If you want the truth, come alone. Attached was an address on the edge of town, near the old industrial district's abandoned docks. Elizabeth knew it was a trap, but she also knew she couldn't ignore it. With a determined sigh, she got up and geared up. Max, seeing her move, stood with a glint of purpose in his eyes. 2 hours later, Elizabeth parked her car under the rusted shadow of an old crane. The docks were empty, kissed by a salty breeze, carrying the faint echo of waves. She walked with steady steps, her slim figure cutting through the fog. Max moved a few feet ahead, his body taut like a drawn bowstring. From behind a stack of cargo containers, a figure stepped out. It was James Cooper, a former department informant. Lean, with a stern face, James had vanished 2 years ago after testifying against a pharmaceutical smuggling ring. His blonde hair was longer, his face unshaven, but his blue eyes still held their sharp edge. "Elizabeth," he said in a low voice, his northeast accent dragging slightly. "Didn't think you'd show." "I don't ignore messages like that, James. Talk fast." Cooper pulled a manila envelope from his jacket and handed it over. His hands shook just enough to hint at the weight of what he was sharing. Pharmacore's not just behind those compounds. They're working on something worse, Phantom Z. It's a next-gen toxin, undetectable even by cutting-edge tests, and they're using special forces cops as test subjects. Hayes is just the tip of the iceberg. The mastermind is Dr. William Pierce, a biochemist who faked his death 5 years ago to dodge an international scandal. Elizabeth's jaw clenched, her chest tightening. She'd heard whispers of Pierce in past cases, but never with solid proof. A gunshot cracked through the darkness. Cooper dropped with a groan, blood spreading fast across his shirt. Max reacted instantly, charging into the shadows where the shot came from. Elizabeth crouched beside Cooper, pressing his wound as her eyes scanned the area. "Take this," Cooper gasped, slipping her a USB drive from his belt. "Everything's there. Trust. No one." His last breath slipped away as his eyes dimmed. Elizabeth shut her eyes for a moment, swallowing the rage and grief threatening to break her. When Max returned, panting, with a scrap of black fabric in his teeth, she gave him a quick pat. "They're hunting us, buddy, but we're not stopping." That morning, Elizabeth went to the one place she could dig for answers without being tracked, the home of Dr. Catherine Reynolds, her old mentor and one of the sharpest toxicologists around, now retired on the outskirts of town. Catherine, with silver blonde hair and piercing eyes behind thin glasses, opened the door in a lab coat still stained with chemicals. Her elegant demeanor and deep voice carried natural authority. "Elizabeth, if you're here at this hour, it means the ghosts of the past are back. And this time they're deadlier than ever, Catherine, Doctor." Catherine Reynolds' home sat nestled in Hillview Estates, a grand Victorian mansion with pointed roofs and stained glass windows that told stories of another era. Stepping inside, Elizabeth was hit with the rich scent of polished wood, aged leather and faint chemicals. The walls were lined with shelves holding thick, worn books, handwritten jars, and precision microscopes. Catherine led her to a hidden basement lab behind a rotating bookshelf, a sanctuary of science and secrets. Under the lab's stark white lights, Elizabeth carefully placed the USB on the central table. Catherine, her angular face unreadable, plugged the drive into her secure computer. Her long, pale hands moved swiftly over the keyboard, her thin lips pursing as documents flashed across the screen. "This is worse than I thought," she muttered, her icy blue eyes reflecting charts and formulas. Phantom Z is a modified organophosphate compound. It's volatile, adaptable, and mimics natural neurotransmitters. Detecting it with current methods is nearly impossible. Max, stationed nearby, watched every move, his breathing steady but alert. "Is there any way to track it?" Elizabeth asked, her voice a mix of hope and quiet desperation. Catherine stood slowly and walked to a cabinet filled with tissue samples and advanced reagents. With precise grace, she pulled out a small vial of fluorescent nanoparticles. "There's something, but it's unconventional. Years ago in Europe, I worked on a project for cross-olfactory detection. It trained dogs not just to sniff out known compounds, but to react to abnormal molecular patterns, even unnatural ones. If Max is already picking up on this, we could boost his ability with a sensory enhancement protocol." Elizabeth raised her eyebrows, her sharp mind catching the idea's potential. "Are you saying we could turn Max into a living detector?" Catherine nodded, her face lighting up with cautious excitement. "Exactly. It's risky, complex, but doable. Right now, it's our only real edge." Without wasting a moment, the two women dove into hours of work. While Elizabeth sorted through the USB's data, lists of victims, money transfers, and coded emails between Robert Hayes and William Pierce, Catherine set up the first stages of the experimental protocol. In the lab's quiet, Max was patient and focused. His amber eyes followed Elizabeth's every command, and under Catherine's careful guidance, he began linking the nanoparticles to Phantom Z's chemical traces. By morning, they had their first breakthrough. During a test, Max reacted strongly to a serum sample from one of the comatose officers. His sharp bark echoed through the lab like an alarm bell. Catherine smiled, a mix of triumph and awe. "We just took a step that could change how we fight invisible chemical threats." Elizabeth let out a breath of relief, but her face stayed grim. "This is just the start. If Pierce and Hayes find out what we're doing, they'll come for us hard." That afternoon, while reviewing the latest intercepted emails, Elizabeth froze. One message mentioned a surgery scheduled for the next day. Sarah Mitchell was set for a procedure at City General Hospital. The assigned surgeon's name appeared in several PharmaCore-linked documents. Her heart stopped, a cold knot forming in her gut. "Sarah, they're going after her." Catherine's jaw tightened, grasping the moment's weight. "Then we don't have a second to spare. Get ready, Elizabeth. We're going into the beast's heart." The sky over the city was a steely grey as the first raindrops pattered softly on the rooftops. City General Hospital stood tall, its white columns and high windows reflecting the brewing storm. In a back parking lot, Elizabeth adjusted the jacket of her fake medical uniform, her movements precise, almost rehearsed. Beside her, Max waited, wearing a special harness Catherine had rigged to hide sensors tied to his scent detection protocol. Catherine, in a real lab coat, finished tweaking their portable gear. Her blonde hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her thin-framed glasses gave her a polished, professional look. Her hands didn't shake. Her calm was that of a scientist who'd made precision an art. "Remember," Catherine said firmly but evenly, "we can't raise suspicion. Stay close to Sarah at all times. I'll monitor from the control room tapped into the hospital's cameras." Elizabeth nodded, her lips set with determination. "I'm not letting anything happen to her." Inside, the hospital buzzed with Monday morning chaos. Wide marble hallways, nurses hurrying past, the constant beep of monitors and ringing phones. Elizabeth moved confidently through the corridors, her fake ID badge dangling from her neck, a clipboard in hand. Max, on a short leash, walked beside her with an almost regal air, his amber eyes scanning every corner, every passerby. In the surgical wing, Sarah lay on a gurney, dressed in a blue hospital gown. Her face, usually bold and lively, was pale and drawn. Her ash-blonde hair was tied in a tight braid, and her blue eyes widened in surprise when she saw Elizabeth approach. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, torn between confusion and relief. Elizabeth didn't answer with words. A firm hand on Sarah's sent the message circumstances wouldn't allow. Minutes later, the assigned surgeon walked in. Dr. Stephen Bennett was average height, athletic, with sharp features. His light brown hair was neatly combed, but his grey eyes held a cold, unyielding edge. His movements were too calculated to go unnoticed. When Max sensed the doctor, his body went rigid. A deep growl rumbled from his throat, echoing in the room like an ancient warning. Elizabeth acted fast, pretending to adjust Max's harness while discreetly triggering the sensor. Its screen flashed bright red. Phantom Z was here. Dr. Bennett noticed the dog's reaction and gave a faint, chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. With a smooth motion, he pulled out a metal tray, covered with a sterile cloth. Elizabeth caught a glimpse of a glass syringe with a clear liquid. Her pulse hammered in her ears. "Detective," Sarah whispered, a sudden understanding in her eyes. "What's going on?" Before Elizabeth could answer, the door burst open. Two men in security uniforms rushed in. Their faces were familiar. Pharmacor's private muscle, known only to those deep in the conspiracy. The ambush was clear. Max moved like lightning, tackling the first man to the ground with deadly precision. Elizabeth, fueled by training and desperation, pulled a syringe from her pocket, loaded with Catherine's experimental neutralizer, and jabbed it into the second guard's arm. He collapsed instantly. Dr. Bennett, calm as if he'd planned for this, backed toward the exit. His hand slipped into his coat pocket, likely reaching for a weapon or another syringe. Elizabeth, heart pounding, cut him off, aiming a scalpel she'd grabbed from the tray. "Not one step," she said, her voice steady, her gaze like molten steel. Bennett paused, calculating, then slowly lowered his hands. His lips curled into a venomous smile. "You don't know who you're messing with. This goes way beyond Pharmacor. Pierce has allies you can't even imagine." Catherine's voice crackled urgently through Elizabeth's hidden earpiece. "Elizabeth, get out now. Cameras show movement. Armed backups are heading to the south wing." Without hesitating, Elizabeth helped Sarah up. Max took point, muscles taut. They slipped into a side hallway toward the maintenance stairs, the sound of enemy footsteps closing in from all sides. Alarms blared through City General's sterile hallways, mixing with the staff's rushed orders and the nearing steps of Pharmacor's reinforcements. The maintenance stairwell, lit by a flickering fluorescent, seemed endless as Elizabeth, Sarah, and Max raced downward to the basement. The air below was colder, damp, with a hollow echo that amplified every sound. Sarah, still shaky from the fading pre-anesthetic, kept pace thanks to Elizabeth's iron grip, her resolve cutting through like a fresh blade. "This way," Elizabeth whispered, shoving open a creaking metal door. They entered a service corridor lined with rusted pipes and dim bulbs. Max moved a few feet ahead, his nose skimming the floor, ears upright like antennas. Suddenly he froze, head snapping toward a ventilation grate. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Without waiting, Elizabeth yanked the grate off and motioned Sarah to crawl in first. The duct was tight and dusty, but wide enough to move through. For minutes, only their ragged breaths and the scrape of clothes against metal filled the silence. Max emerged first into an unused supply room, its rusted shelves and stacked boxes proof of neglect. Elizabeth and Sarah followed, breathless but unharmed. A sharp sound cut through, a magazine clicking into a gun. Elizabeth raised a hand, eyes locked on the half-open door. Max growled deeply. The figure that stepped through was a shock. Captain Robert Hayes. Dressed in his pristine uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, the captain held a Beretta M9 with icy calm. His face, once hidden behind a bureaucratic mask, now showed a flicker of dark arrogance. His light brown hair was perfectly combed, as if betrayal and manhunts hadn't touched him. "Elizabeth," he said, his deep voice booming in the small space. "I should have stopped you from the start. You were always too stubborn for your own good." Elizabeth didn't flinch. Her free hand brushed the tactical knife hidden at her belt. "I knew you were behind it, but I didn't think you'd sell out so cheap." Hayes let out a dry laugh, humorless, bouncing off the walls. "Cheap," he sneered. "You have no idea what's at stake. Pharmacor's not just a drug company. It's a new world order, a quiet revolution. Phantom Z is the ultimate weapon to shape governments, economies, civilizations. And you're just a pawn who moved too far." His blue eyes narrowed as he aimed at Max. Elizabeth stepped in front without thinking. Then white gas hissed from the vents. Catherine, from the control room, had triggered a backup plan. Hayes stumbled back, his face twisting in irritation. Elizabeth seized the moment. With a swift flick, she threw her knife, lodging it in his armed forearm. He dropped the gun with a pained grunt. Max pounced, pinning him down with brutal force. Elizabeth rushed over, snapping plastic ties tight around his wrists as Max growled inches from his face. "You're going to spill everything," she said, her grey eyes burning with contained fury. "And I'll watch you fall." Catherine's calm voice came through the earpiece. "Perimeter's secure. We've got 5 minutes before outside forces arrive. Move now." Elizabeth nodded, yanking Hayes to his feet. Minutes later, they slipped out the hospital's back door to an unmarked van, where Catherine waited behind the wheel. Her polished demeanor didn't hide the calculated energy in her every move. "You got him?" she asked without turning, her voice cool with satisfaction. "Got him," Elizabeth replied, shoving Hayes inside. Max leaped into the back, settling beside Sarah, who gave a faint but confident smile. "Let's finish what we started." The van roared to life, vanishing into the city's wet streets under a steady drizzle. The fight was far from over, but for the first time in weeks, Elizabeth felt the tide turning. The van sped through the city's dark streets like a fleeting shadow, its tires humming softly on the wet pavement. The city lights flickered in the distance, reflecting like shattered mirrors in the puddles. Inside, the air was thick with barely contained tension. Elizabeth sat across from Robert Hayes, her steely eyes never leaving the captain. Her slim frame, clad in tactical gear, radiated unyielding resolve. Catherine drove with surgical precision, her hands steady on the wheel, her blue eyes barely blinking as she calculated every turn and alternate route. Sarah, though still showing signs of exhaustion, stayed alert, her icy gaze scanning the road through the rearview mirror. Max, in the back, sat still but vigilant, his ears up, his wet nose twitching with quiet intensity. Their destination was an old warehouse in the Riverside Warehouse District, a red brick building with broken windows and a rusted zinc roof. It had once been a chemical lab, abandoned after a federal lawsuit. Its isolation made it perfect for an uninterrupted interrogation. Catherine pulled up to the back entrance. Elizabeth yanked the door open, forcing Hayes out into the drizzling rain. Inside, the warehouse was cold and bleak. Metal beams crisscrossed the high ceiling, and their footsteps echoed in the vast emptiness. A single industrial light hung from the center, casting a glow over a rusted metal table and 4 chairs arranged with eerie precision. Elizabeth shoved Hayes into one, tightening the ties harder than needed. Her face showed no mercy, only a resolve forged by betrayal and pain. "Let's get started," Catherine said calmly, spreading out a folder with the USB's documents and a tablet showing links between Pharmacore, Hayes, and the elusive Dr. William Pierce. Hayes, despite the wound in his arm and bound wrists, kept an arrogant sneer, his lips tight with disdain. "If you think you can break me, you don't know what you're up against," he spat, his deep voice echoing in the empty space. Elizabeth leaned in, her grey eyes flashing with controlled fury. "I don't need to break you, Robert. I just need you to confirm what we already know. And trust me, I can get what I want without you saying a word." Catherine pulled a small vial of clear liquid from a metal case and set it on the table with a sharp clink. Her gaze, sharp as a scalpel, left no room for doubt. "This is a catalyst derived from Phantom Z. A tiny exposure starts the symptoms: blurred vision, irregular heartbeat, respiratory failure, slow but unstoppable. We have the antidote. It's up to you, Robert." For the first time, a shadow crossed Hayes' stone-cold face. His jaw tightened, his blue eyes flickering with a hint of fear. Sarah, leaning against a beam with a deceptively relaxed pose, watched silently. Seconds stretched like taut wires. Finally, Hayes exhaled sharply through his nose, his gaze dropping with bitter resignation. "Pierce, he's in Europe. He used Pharmacore as a front. The real Phantom Z project is stored in an underground lab in a major European city, built beneath next-gen biotech's headquarters. It's guarded by a private group of ex-military and biosecurity experts." Catherine recorded every word, her fingers swiping through images and maps on the tablet with fluid ease. Elizabeth kept her eyes on Hayes, reading every twitch for truth. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice low. Hayes swallowed hard, his throat visibly tightening. Pierce plans to slip microdoses of Phantom Z into the pharmaceutical supply chains of multiple countries. It's not about killing fast, it's about creating dependency and control over time. A new kind of chemical slavery. Elizabeth's fists clenched, her breathing slow but her eyes blazing. Who else is in on it? Give me names. Tell me in the comments. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. Hayes hesitated for a split second before dropping a name that hit the room like a slab of stone. Senator John Randall. He funded the operation for a major cut of the profits. He's the political key that keeps it all under the radar. Sarah straightened, her face hardening. That guy chairs the Senate's Bioethics Committee. If this gets out, it'll shake half the country. Elizabeth stepped back from the table, her mind clicking like a well-oiled machine. She rested a hand on Max's back, his warmth grounding her. "We're going to Europe," she said, her voice steady with resolve. Catherine snapped the folder shut, her blue eyes sparking with renewed fire. Then the real hunt begins. The private jet lifted off the wet runway at the city's airport at 3:12 a.m. The cabin, quiet and lined with dark leather, hummed softly as it cut through the thick clouds over the east coast. Elizabeth sat at a small polished oak table, her grey eyes fixed on the documents Catherine had laid out carefully. Sarah, a few feet away, studied blueprints of next-gen biotech's lab, while Max slept at her feet, his breathing light but alert. Catherine, pristine in a pearl grey suit and silk blue blouse, leaned over her ultralight laptop. Her blonde hair was tied in a neat bun, not a strand out of place, and her long pale fingers moved with the same precision she brought to the lab. "The complex is on Industry Avenue in a major European city," she explained in a measured tone, her faint European accent crisp. "The visible part is a biotech firm, but below it are 3 underground levels. There are only 2 confirmed entry points, a main entrance with biometric scanners and a service tunnel tied to the water treatment plant." Elizabeth nodded, absorbing every detail. Her face was calm, the kind of calm that comes from crossing too many danger lines to feel fear anymore. She wore a light linen shirt and fitted black pants, her dark brown hair in a low ponytail. The shadows under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights, but her posture was unbreakable. "The tunnels are only shot," she said. "The main entrance would be suicide." Sarah looked up from the blueprints, her blue eyes glinting with strategy and defiance. "Satellite footage shows the perimeter tightens every 6 hours. If we hit at 3 a.m. local time, there's a 30-minute window during the guard shift change." Catherine closed her laptop with a soft click and rested her palms on the table. "One more thing. Financial records show a Phantom Z shipment is set to move to another country in the next 48 hours for redistribution. If we don't stop it, the project will scatter and become impossible to track." A heavy silence settled over the cabin. Elizabeth took a deep breath and glanced at Max, who opened his eyes as if sensing the moment's weight. Their amber gazes locked, a silent vow between warriors. "We'll stop them," Elizabeth whispered, "whatever it takes." 12 hours later, under a leaden sky in the European city, the team moved through the industrial district's shadows. The city, with its clean lines and sober buildings, hid a secret that could shift the world's balance. Elizabeth, in a black tactical suit of ultralight fibers, glided along the walls like a predator. Sarah, similarly geared, covered the rear, her icy gaze sweeping every corner. Max, in a reinforced harness, led the way. His breaths were nearly silent as his paws landed lightly, belying his size. Catherine, in adapted tactical wear, stayed close to Elizabeth, holding a portable device tracking chemical traces. The service tunnel was narrow, its cracked concrete walls reeking of old dampness. Flashlights on their weapons cut through the dark like scalpels. Halfway in, Max stopped dead, his body tensed, and his nose pointed to a side grate. Elizabeth crouched beside him, a hand on his back. "What is it, boy?" Catherine's sensor buzzed softly. Its screen showed high levels of organophosphates in the air. The signal was clear. Phantom Z was nearby. "We're right above the main chamber," Catherine whispered, her lips barely moving. "There's an emergency exit off this tunnel. If we get through, we'll hit the heart of the facility." Elizabeth exchanged a glance with Sarah. No words were needed. They moved fast. Using a specialized tool, Elizabeth pried off the grate's bolts. The minutes dragged, heavy with the weight of critical moments. When the last bolt came free, a rush of cold air poured out. A metal hallway sloped downward into the unknown. Without hesitation, Elizabeth went first, Max close behind, followed by Catherine and Sarah. The hallway opened into a room lit by stark white lights. Metal racks lined with sealed vials and containers stood behind grates. At the center, on a circular steel platform, were 3 black briefcases stamped with Pharmacore and next-gen biotech logos in silver. But they weren't alone. A figure stepped from the shadows. Tall, lean, with platinum blonde hair slicked back, his fine, symmetrical face radiated an almost inhuman chill. His gray eyes gleamed with arrogance and meticulous intellect. "Welcome," he said, his deep, polished voice laced with a European accent. "I'm glad you made it this far. I'm Dr. William Pierce." The waters of Crystal Lake shimmered under the warm glow of a European sunset. The distant mountains stood sharp against the horizon, draped in soft mist like an ancient veil. In a sleek glass and steel building, the headquarters of the International Biochemical Security Unit, a white marble auditorium buzzed with delegates, scientists, and officers from across the globe. Flags fluttered quietly as the crowd awaited the ceremony. Elizabeth Carter stood at a dark wood podium, dressed in a black ceremonial uniform with silver insignia that gleamed under the lights. Her calm, graceful stance radiated quiet authority. Her dark brown hair, tied in a low bun, framed her fine features and gray eyes, seasoned by hard-won experience. Beside her, Max stood tall, wearing a decorative black leather harness with engraved steel plates. His amber eyes tracked every movement with the sharp loyalty that had made him a legend. In front of them, Director Paul Harrison, a lean man with ash-blonde hair and noble features, stepped forward holding a small blue velvet box. His deep, steady voice filled the room with solemn weight. "Today we honor an unprecedented feat, the neutralization of the Phantom Z project, the dismantling of the criminal network led by William Pierce, and the exposure of a conspiracy involving top political and corporate figures have forever changed how the world faces invisible chemical threats." But beyond technology and strategy, what prevailed here was integrity, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a human and her animal partner. With a solemn gesture, Paul opened the box, revealing a gold medal etched with a wolf and a crossed shield. The Investigative Valor Medal, never before awarded to a canine, was carefully fastened to Max's harness. A warm, prolonged applause erupted. Elizabeth, with a soft but radiant smile, gently patted her partner's head. After the ceremony, in the building's garden, Elizabeth joined Sarah Mitchell and Catherine Reynolds. Sarah, now leading the Special Biochemical Surveillance Unit in Washington, wore a sharp navy suit and carried her usual confident air. Her smile was genuine. "I didn't think I'd live to see this, Liz," she said, offering a glass of white wine. "What you built here, this global canine detection program, will save lives everywhere." Catherine, in a pearl grey coat and silk scarf, approached with her usual elegance. Her blue eyes radiated calm. "And it all started with a dog who wouldn't be fooled," she said with a half smile. "The protocol we developed is now standard in hospitals across over 30 countries. Phantom Z is gone. The culprits, from Pierce to Senator Randall, are in permanent custody. No loose ends." Elizabeth nodded slowly. Her gaze drifted to the lake, where the city's lights began to sparkle like scattered stars. She let out a soft breath, releasing the ghosts of months of pursuit, betrayal, and battle. It's the end of one era and the start of another. Max, at her side, gave a satisfied whine and pressed his head against her leg. Elizabeth smiled and knelt to meet his eyes. "Rest, buddy. We did it." The sun slipped behind the mountains as a string quartet's first notes filled the cool air. Amid quiet laughter, raised glasses, and hushed talks, a story of bravery, loyalty, and justice drew to a close. Elizabeth knew shadows never fully fade, but as long as there were people willing to look beyond the surface and partners like Max, the balance would always have hope. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.